New York Post posted an article letting all Knicks fans know that the New York Knicks thought Quentin Grimes was untouchable in the Donovan Mitchell trade talk. Plus, a Knick great talks about his time playing for the New York Knicks. All that and much more on the Knicks Digest. What's up, guys? It's your boy Dariel from Knicks Digest. And you know what? We're going to hop right into the video. And for the first topic, we're going to be talking about Quentin Grimes being untouchable and his frustration. So, like I said in the beginning of the video, we're going to be talking about New York Post posting an article talking about how Quentin Grimes was untouchable during the Donovan Mitchell trade talk. Now that was a part of the article, but another part of the article they were talking about Quentin Grimes' frustration within just the offense and just the rotation, feeling like he's not really touching the ball, not really being part of the offense. But if we dive into the article and we take a look at where it says that he was untouchable in the Donovan Mitchell trade, there clearly needs to be a change, if only because the Knicks can't afford to operate with the current version of Grimes. They didn't make him untouchable in trade negotiations for Donovan Mitchell for this to happen. The first obvious solution is to make that blockbuster we've been hearing about for so long, clear out the logjam and raise the Knicks ceiling. Rose is sitting on these draft picks and the NBA universe has been waiting for him to pounce. Rose as in, of course, Leon Rose. Now, I feel like the rumor this past summer was that Quentin Grimes was definitely a part of the trade package that was going to send Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks. But now that we're learning that he was absolutely untouchable, I'm not sure how I feel about that. In past videos with my guy Chris, shout out Chris, I have said that I'm not a big fan of the whole Donovan Mitchell trade talk. I'm not a fan of Donovan Mitchell per se. I don't really think that he'll raise the ceiling of this New York Knicks team if he's traded to the Knicks. But at the same time, I'm not completely shutting the door on it. Depending on the pieces that we give up, depending on what we get back, maybe alongside Donovan Mitchell, I'm definitely open to that trade. And now hearing that Quentin Grimes was absolutely untouchable, it kind of makes you think like Leon Rose, like it just kind of makes you think about where his mind is at as far as like acquiring talent, as far as adding talent to this team. Another part of the article is Quentin Grimes himself talking about the frustration he's experiencing within the offense. If we take a look here, it's just hard when you go the whole quarter without touching the ball, the whole second quarter without touching the ball, and then you get one shot and you gotta make it. Grimes 23 said, so it's tough going out there and just standing in the corner the whole game. And if you've been watching the Knicks game as of late, you can tell that Quentin Grimes is definitely in a slump. You can definitely tell that his confidence is way down. And Chris just put out a video, I think yesterday or a couple days ago, just with Quentin Grimes expressing his frustration in that video as well. If you're Quentin Grimes, the only way that you're going to be able to get out of the slump, you just got to shoot your way out of it. That's the only solution. And as far as his confidence, the only way he's going to be able to get his confidence back is if he keeps shooting the rock. And I get it. It's difficult because it feels like you have a coach who's going to yank you out of the game as soon as you make one mistake. And that's never a great place to be, but you can only control what you can control. And as far as Knicks fans, we want to see Quentin Grimes just keep shooting the rock, because even though your confidence is down, the rest of your team and the rest of your teammates, they do believe in you, and that's why they have you in the starting lineup. But what's very interesting about the article is when it goes on to talk about Coach Tibbs and talks about his relationship with the players and just his coaching style. I think that was the best part of the article. So if we take a look into it, it says, Thibodeau has received the brunt of the criticism for fostering an environment with so much discouragement, which is only partly fair. He's a great coach, but a bad communicator, an issue that got him in trouble in Minnesota and he never bothered to correct. His offense is indeed too heavy on isolation, leaving role players as spectators to consistent doses of dribbling and dribbling and dribbling. The Knicks haven't ranked better than 28th in assists during Thibodeau's tenure, the league's worst cumulative over 4+ seasons. That's bad, of course, and undoubtedly annoying for players. And again, if you've been watching the Knicks games as of late, or ever since Coach Tibbs has been a coach for the New York Knicks, that's one thing that you were able to pick up. The offense doesn't seem like it has a nice natural flow to it. I feel like, especially with this team, I feel like Coach Tibbs would be better suited if he implemented an offense where it's just up and down. But Coach Tibbs is known to be a half-court offense. And he's also known to be a defensive coach. So he really harps on the defense, but where his strong suit doesn't really lie is on the offensive end. And Chris and I have gone back and forth talking about what we want to see from particular players. And Quentin Grimes, we're just talking about him specifically right now, I feel like he would definitely benefit from the offense being changed a little bit, it's specifically being a little bit more of an up-tempo offense. Chris and I, we've also discussed if Coach Tibbs is going to be the coach of the Knicks past this season. Of course, it depends on how the Knicks do this season. If they end up being in the play-in and then playing their way into the playoffs, or if they're out of the playoffs completely, or if they end as a top 6 seed and they don't have to be in the play-in, and see how they do in the actual playoffs. It all depends on a lot of things. And one thing that Chris and I do agree on is we don't think Coach Tibbs is going to be the coach to lead this team to prosperity. Now, as far as what does prosperity look like, it's not going to be an NBA Finals team. I think Knicks fans, we are realistic, and we know that this team is not an NBA Finals team. We also know that it's not an Eastern Conference Finals team as of right now. Now, that we feel like is because of the personnel of the team, the players on the team. But Coach Tibbs being the leader on the team as the coach, he of course has to be a reason as to why the Knicks are going to be able to move forward and pass the first round and hopefully into the Eastern Conference Finals. And we'll see what happens. I mean, one day after the Knicks lose to the Bucks in the in-season tournament, you got Grimes complaining about his role on the team. We got a lot of different rumors swirling, the whole Zach LaVine stuff going on. So we'll see what happens as we move forward in this season. But in my opinion, something has to change, whether if that's personnel, whether if it's a coaching change, I'm not sure exactly. But whenever you're in the middle of the pack, that's kind of NBA purgatory. You don't really want to be in the middle of the pack in the NBA. You either want to be a flat out contender or you want to be a team that's obviously rebuilding, because if you're in the middle, there's not really a clear cut direction as to where you can go, and it makes things a lot more difficult for the rest of the season. And now moving on to the second part of the video, we're going to be talking about Kristaps' time with the New York Knicks. Kristaps went on the JJ Redick podcast, The Old Man in the Three, and on the podcast he talked about his different stints as he's been in the NBA, talking about the Dallas Mavericks, the Knicks, the Wizards, and now with the Boston Celtics. And if you take a look here, one of the quotes that he had was, "Looking back now, it wasn't the most stable situation. Coaching changes, different team every year. Melo was not there for my third year. I wish we never asked for a trade. They were going to trade me anyway. It was already done anyway, just so they can say, oh, he asked for a trade." Now, looking back on Kristaps' tenure with the Knicks, it's as a New York Knicks fan, it's a mixture of up and down feelings. Being drafted as a rookie, nobody really knew who he was, and nobody was really expecting much of him. But being a 7'3" player, being able to put the ball on the floor, shooting the three, he was Victor Wembanyama before Victor Wembanyama, just a little less athletic. But me personally, I remember the day they announced the trade where he got traded to Dallas and then he was going to be paired up with Luka Doncic. I actually wasn't upset, because if we remember, in his third season, I believe it was in February, and he was going up against the Milwaukee Bucks. He went down the lane and he did a nice one-handed dunk, but when he landed, he tore his ACL. And he tore his ACL, he missed the rest of the season, and I believe he missed most of the next season. But players with that height, anything 7'1", 7'2", whenever you get in that range, you always got to be a little weary. If we took a look at the history of the big men that are around that height, and as far as the injury results, it's not great. We look at Ralph Sampson. Ralph Sampson was around 7'5", 7'6" in the 80s. He had a few good seasons with the Houston Rockets, and then injuries started plaguing him, and then he was out of the league. I'm jumping from different times. We're looking at Yao Ming. Yao Ming being 7'6", he had 5 seasons in the NBA, and then he started breaking down. We look at George Marason. We look at Mark Eaton. We look at Manute Bol. We look at all these players who were like 7'1" or 7'2" or above that height, and they tend not to really last that long. You're just carrying so much weight. And specifically with Kristaps, he was like one of the first players at that height that we saw not being your typical big man and just planting himself in the paint, having a back to the basket game. He was primarily a perimeter player, and one of his specialties was shooting threes, and he used that to his advantage, where he would pump fake and then he would drive by you and put you in the bucket. So whenever you have a player of that height and of that athleticism, you're putting so much stress on the body that I don't know how long the body is going to be able to last. And you can say that when he tore his ACL, it was a freak accident, or you can say that it could have been maybe a wear and tear. It's really difficult to say. In my opinion, I just didn't think Kristaps Porzingis was going to hold up. And if we take a look at his career post New York Knicks, he went to the Dallas Mavericks, where he was still battling injuries. He was there for maybe, I don't know, 3-4 seasons, maybe 5. I can't pinpoint how much, but a few of those seasons he was still battling injuries. And it goes to say, to my point, of big men of that status having to battle through injuries. Now, there's also the component of him pairing up with Luka, and there was always the rumors of him and Luka not liking each other and not really complimenting one each other. And that's actually something he said within the JJ Redick episode, that it was just ego and him being really young. He got to the Dallas Mavericks, and he knew that he was going to have to be battling with Luka as far as it being his or Luka's team. And in the episode, he says that just chalk it up to being young and naive and having a big ego. And now he's a way past that, and he's happy to be with the Boston Celtics. And then, but if we look at past the Dallas Mavericks stint, then he got shipped to DC and he played for the Wizards. That was last season. And he had a good season. I believe he was averaging around 18 points. But the thing is, with those stats, those are kind of empty stats. He wasn't really playing for anything. The Wizards, they didn't really have a good team. So it's not like you can look at it and be like, yeah, he was in a high-pressure situation, and those 18 points or whatever he averaged for the season, they were during high-pressure situations, and it really meant something. It was kind of empty stats because they weren't really playing for anything. Now he's in a great situation with Boston. He's probably the third or fourth best player. He doesn't have that pressure on him. But to bring it back during his Knicks stint, he had the pressure on him because Melo was already on the downhill of his career. He wasn't in his prime. He wasn't that offensive juggernaut that he was when he first got to the Knicks. And we saw the promise with Kristaps, and we started putting all the pressure on him. And we saw what happened. Nothing really happened. They didn't go to the playoffs. They weren't a contender. They were kind of a laughingstock of the league at the time. So the Kristaps Porzingis stint with the New York Knicks is always it's an interesting one. It's a fun one to look back on. I ain't gonna hold you. After I saw that podcast episode with JJ, I went back into the YouTube, typed in Kristaps Porzingis rookie highlights, and I just saw him putting all these putback dunks back in the bucket. Saw him shooting threes. Saw him putting the ball on the floor. Some post moves. Like, the promise was there, but again, I don't know if his body would have lasted. And on top of that, man, if we're being real, I'm a realistic Knicks fan. I feel like the Knicks organization, hopefully they can prove me wrong moving forward. But just from the results that I've seen in my lifetime, they will find a way to mess it up. I don't know what would have happened. I don't know what would have happened with Kristaps if he stayed with the Knicks. I don't know if it would have been. I don't know. I can't pinpoint it. But I just feel like the Knicks would have messed it up. And there's another example of that is when Steph Curry got drafted. Steph Curry got drafted 7th, and I believe the Knicks had the 8th pick. And the Knicks were going to pick Steph Curry if the Warriors didn't. And everybody says that, like, oh, wow, you guys could have had Steph Curry. You guys could have had this generational talent, changing the way basketball, not just players in the NBA, but basketball as a whole is being played around the world. And in my opinion, like, I feel like if Steph Curry was able to be drafted by the Knicks, I feel like the Knicks somehow would have messed it up. I don't know how. Maybe because Steph Curry, when he came into the league, his thing was that his ankles weren't great. He was continuously rolling his ankles. I believe he had ankle surgery, and I feel like if that was the Knicks, and Steph kept getting those ankle injuries, I feel like the Knicks would have gave up on him, traded him, or Steph could have been out of the league. And then we would have never seen the Steph Curry phenomenon that has been the last decade plus. But Kristaps, I just want to say thank you. I want to say salute. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your service when you were a New York Knick, and you gave us a lot of memories. But that's it for today's video, guys. I want to say thank you for checking out. Leave it in the comments and let me know what you think about the whole Kristaps Porzingis stint with the New York Knicks. Let me know about the whole Quentin Grimes drama going on with him not being part of the rotation. Leave it in the comments. But until next time, guys, we'll check you on the next video. Peace.